I'm known for being the obedient girl. In the 5 years we've been together, no matter what Ethan did outside, I silently endured. Until that day, when I found a pair of stockings and lingerie in the hotel suite that didn't belong to me. He didn't feel guilty for being caught, and just lazily smiled. Be good. Go and check out the room, he said. His friends started betting on how long I'd be able to tolerate it this time. Ethan rested his chin on his hand, nonchalantly saying, "She's so obedient. She'll calm down in a couple of days." Just like before, I would helplessly beg him not to leave. Ethan didn't know that when we obedient girls reach the age of marriage, we always listen to our parents. So when he was feeling smug, I gathered my courage and asked the handsome guy I was set up with, "The child will take my last name. Would you be okay with that?" Chapter 1. Ethan's room number. I rang the doorbell for a long time, but no one answered. I withdrew my hand, leaned against the wall, and reached down to support my bag from below. The bag had a 14-inch laptop inside, making my shoulder ache a bit. After a while, the door beside me finally opened. Ethan was only wearing a bath towel around his waist, his bare chest still dripping with water droplets. The tall man leaned against the doorframe, his brows slightly furrowed. "Why didn't you just come tomorrow?" I held the bag with both hands, looking up and speaking softly. Sorry. There was a bug in the project, so I had to stay late to finish it." Ethan moved his hand aside and walked in while saying, "How much can you make with that crappy job of yours? You should quit it sooner." Before the hotel door closed behind me, I quickly stepped inside. As soon as I entered, I froze in place. Ethan was staying in a suite, and there was a long hallway from the door to the room. Turning the corner, I could see stockings that had been torn apart on the living room sofa, along with lingerie scattered on the floor and a thong with just a few thin straps. I knew Ethan liked to have fun, and I knew that during the years I had been by his side, he hadn't stopped seeing other women. But I always thought, as long as I don't see it, it doesn't exist. I always tried to avoid seeing Ethan being intimate with other women. If I didn't see it, I could keep lying to myself. Just like a fish, I gave myself 7 seconds of memory to numb myself. I looked at Ethan. I didn't know when, but he was already leaning against the bar, watching me. He was holding a glass of wine, and I could faintly hear water running from the bathroom in the distance. His gaze toward me wasn't panicked or guilty. "You came too late," he shrugged, his voice calm. I tightly held onto my bag, afraid that if I lost my grip, the laptop would fall to the ground. It was a computer worth over $10,000, which had cost me nearly half a month's salary. Just as I was about to speak, the bathroom door suddenly opened. Chapter 2. A long-legged, seductive woman, wrapped in a loose bathrobe. When she saw me, her reaction was indifferent, as though it wasn't surprising for a third person to be here. "Ethan," her voice was sticky, and as she pressed against Ethan, exposing a large portion of her body, she said, "My endorsement." Ethan slightly pulled back, took a sip of his drink, and said, "Go find Jordan. You can leave now," the woman sweetly said. "Thank you." By the time she came out, she was fully dressed. I stared at her figure, finally remembering she was the rising star Carla. When she reached the door, I subtly stepped aside, maybe to flatter Ethan. She suddenly stopped, looked me over, and then turned back with a smile. "Ethan's taste is really good. Even his assistant is top-notch with that pure and seductive vibe. If she were in the entertainment industry, she'd be super popular." Ethan didn't even look up, didn't refute, just seemed a bit impatient. "Aren't you leaving yet?" With her bag slung over her shoulder, she swayed her hips happily and walked out. Ethan changed clothes and walked over, familiarly taking the bag from my hand, just like so many times before. His demeanor was natural, as if nothing had happened. He casually wrapped his arm around my waist. "Are you hungry? What do you want to eat tonight? I'll take you out." Seeing that I was still standing there, he raised an eyebrow and seemed to think of something. He lazily smiled, his fingers tracing circles on my waist. "Not happy? Want it? I'll have someone book another room next door. It's always been like this." "I know. I've always known. I know he's a womanizer. I know he's promiscuous. but I still walked in without hesitation. I'm the one who humiliated myself, the one who handed him the knife. So, I've never blamed anyone, including Ethan. I've always known that one day we would completely go our separate ways, but I always thought, just a little longer, just a little longer. And now, as that day arrives, to my surprise, I didn't feel the heart-wrenching pain I expected. I only felt relief. Maybe this heart has long been numbed by all the wounds. I pulled Ethan's hand away, lowered my eyes, and took the bag back. Ethan, I want to break up with you. My voice was low, but firm, filled with an unprecedented courage. Chapter 3. After I spoke, the room fell silent for a long time. I couldn't help but look up at Ethan. He was studying me, as if trying to figure out whether I was serious. Suddenly, he chuckled lightly. Break up? He looked at me, bent down, his eyes reflecting two small versions of me. Augustina. He clicked his tongue, as if recalling something. How old were you when you first met me? 19 or 20? He shook his head. Can't remember. Anyway, back then, you didn't stand out except for being obedient. You had thick bangs, and a pair of black-framed glasses covered half of your face. Did I ask you to try it? He straightened up and adjusted his cuff. You blushed and nodded without hesitation. I even told you that I'm a scumbag, that I don't force people to be with me, and no one can force me to only love one person. He looked at me with a touch of pity, sighed, and said, what did you say back then? You said you were willing. Now you're using breakup as a threat against me. He wiped away my tears, a bit confused. Don't you think that's unfair to me? All right. Stop crying. Haven't you adapted well these years? This time it's my mistake. But next time, I won't let you face this again. He gripped my shoulders and turned me around, his chin resting on my shoulder. In front of us was a huge floor-to-ceiling mirror, reflecting his self-assuredness and my tear-streaked face. Do you know how old that woman was just now? 20. If I remember correctly, you're 26 this year, right? Instead of using childish tricks like breaking up to keep me, you might want to spend more time on beauty and fitness. After all, we've been the best match these years. Everyone else is just a passerby. You don't need to take them to heart. He's always been vile, but it's hidden beneath a beautiful exterior. So even when he says things like this, it sounds like a deep confession. I no longer had the energy to struggle or argue. Feeling like a puppet in Ethan's hands, I gently moved, but still firmly said, Ethan, we're breaking up. He chuckled nonchalantly. Fine. I know. You break up. Then, he glanced at his watch, grabbed his suit, and kissed me all over. Be good. Remember to check out the room. I have a meeting. The new shoes and bags this quarter. I'll have them sent to your place. As for the rest, I'll make it up to you when we get back tonight. Maybe the word breakup has come up so many times between us that it's lost all its power. At first, Ethan was the one who often mentioned breaking up. He knew earlier than I did the power of that word. Augustina, if you can't take it, we can break up. You know I can't stand seeing you upset. I'm easy to deal with, so he always smiles and easily comforts me. Then, gently brushes it aside. But this time, I told myself, don't be soft-hearted. Don't back down. After all, breaking up doesn't need the other person's agreement. Chapter 4. The wounds caused by emotions are the quickest and cleanest. After returning from the hotel, I came down with a fever, and in my drowsy sleep, I saw the 19-year-old version of myself, forgotten by Ethan. Ethan had a great appearance, even without power or status. Just a snap of his fingers could attract a group of people who'd willingly date him. But what's worse, he also had an outstanding family background. He preferred women who were bold and glamorous, from celebrities to supermodels. Without exception, no one would think he'd be interested in a good girl like me, someone who was obedient but had nothing else to offer. But by chance, after having tasted all kinds of exquisite things in life, when he started to feel bored, he casually noticed me. As dusk fell, on a quiet path in the school, the first time I saw him, he had his arm around a girl, Avery, so beautiful that even though the school had long stopped holding the cheesy campus flower voting, whenever people mentioned her, they would still call her the campus beauty. He was generous, And although he was known by only one name, it spread across the entire school. Every time Avery went out with him, she would receive gifts worth hundreds of thousands. She wanted to experience the celebrity dream, and with a simple wave of his hand, Avery, who had no notable works, could immediately shoot for magazines and take endorsements. When Avery clung to him and acted coquettishly, I looked up for a moment. Ethan's expression was indifferent, the cigarette between his fingers flickering, perhaps out of impatience. He raised his chin toward me and diverted her attention. "Who's that?" Avery immediately became alert, blocking his view with her hand. "She's very obedient. Not like us." I lowered my head and hurriedly walked past. Ethan smiled indifferently but said nothing. Since I was young, I had always been the most trouble-free, obedient girl in everyone's eyes. My mom raised me alone, and her love was wrapped in layer after layer of rules. My curfew was always 9 o'clock. My hair could never fall past my shoulders, and my bangs had to be cut above my eyebrows. Under her meticulous care, I grew into the most well-behaved version of myself. Conservative, gentle, following every established social rule, borrowing books from the library. Even when sick, I'd get up to return them, afraid of being late. I thought my life would always follow this well-ordered path, until Ethan reached out to me. That hand was no different from the forbidden fruit Eve offered Adam. Temptation, decay, intoxication. Later, when Avery found out, she was shocked and said the same thing she had said before. Only this time, it was aimed at me. She said, "Ethan's not like us. Don't get too involved." I said, "I won't." But later, those unrequited loves became thin iron wires, coiling around my bones, one circle at a time. Chapter 5. I thought that with someone as awful as Ethan, once I experienced the pain, I would be able to walk away without hesitation and move on to a better path. But when a bad person isn't completely rotten, and still leaves behind a little bit of sincerity, that's the most lethal part. I don't know if he's naturally good at comforting people, or if he just treats me differently. He sent me in the car, gave me a house, and showered me with countless designer gifts. It became the norm. I told him that I grew up in a strict household, that there were many things I hadn't experienced. I hadn't watched a sunrise, or chased a sunset. At 4 a.m., he picked me up from bed, drove for over an hour, and we stood on a mountaintop waiting for the sunrise. I was on a business trip, and I casually mentioned that I had left a sleeping toy at home and couldn't sleep that night. At the time, he was abroad, and on the phone, he chuckled while holding a cigarette. "Oh, what should I do?" In less than 2 hours, his private plane was circling and landing on the hotel's rooftop. The crew had even tied a pretty bow on the old toy and wished me a good night's sleep. I knew this wasn't love. And besides, someone like Ethan would never understand how to truly love someone. So, I let myself indulge, and I was lenient with him, but I would still search for signs in the small details. I tried to prove that, at some fleeting moment, he shared the same frequency with my feelings for him. A few days ago, after an intense sexual encounter, I drowsily felt a burning sensation. I suddenly woke up, pushing against his chest. "You didn't wear a condom?" Ethan pinched my earlobe and playfully said, "I forgot. If you're pregnant, just have the baby. You think I can't support it?" As he spoke, a trace of tenderness flashed in his eyes, as if he really had expectations for the future. "How can we?" I pushed him away, bent down to search for medicine. "How could we have a baby? We wouldn't last. What's the point of having a child?" Ethan's face darkened, as if he was deliberately going against me. He grabbed my hand and took the pills, one by one, and flushed them down the toilet. "Augustina, if I find out you're taking those pills, you're done." Something stirred in my heart, a fleeting moment of hesitation, but in that instant, I snapped back to reality. As cold as ice, I avoided Ethan, and in the end, I took the pills. When I woke from my dream, everything was silent, and Ethan hadn't returned. The phone vibrated, and I answered it. It was my mom again, going over the same old speech. "When I think of you, I can't sleep." She didn't know about me and Ethan. In her eyes, I had reached the age where I was almost out of chances to marry. "If you don't find someone now, in a few years, Even blind dates won't work in your favor. Sue Auntie's son is in Beijing. If you meet him, it won't cost you anything. When I was in high school, she was afraid I'd fall in love too early, so she used to cut my hair messily. Now, she's afraid I won't get married, and she practically wants to sell me online. I sighed and interrupted her. I'll meet him. It's just to understand each other. Meeting him doesn't mean anything. She paused. What did you say? I repeated. I said, I'll meet him. I needed an opportunity, a chance to completely leave Ethan behind. Chapter 6. By the time Ethan left the company, it was already late. As the car started, he remembered what had happened earlier in the afternoon. He had promised to go back and comfort me, but Martin had arranged a gathering and called him 80 times to get him to attend. It wasn't a big deal. Ethan smiled indifferently, and the car headed towards the club. When they arrived, Martin slapped him on the shoulder, then looked behind him. Wow, rare. Augustina didn't come tonight? That little bunny, who didn't have any tricks up her sleeve, just liked to stick around and watch Ethan with those big eyes. But Ethan loved this. He'd let her follow him everywhere, never caring about how it looked. Ethan handed his coat to the waiter. She saw Carla today, and now she's throwing a tantrum. Martin clicked his tongue. I thought it was something serious. But you've gone too far. Who does that? You know she can't stand your flings, and you still have to push her buttons. A rabbit will bite when cornered. Aren't you afraid if you push her too much, she'll jump the fence and leave? Ethan lit a cigarette. Women without a temper aren't fun. Let her act out for a couple of days. Martin slapped his forehead. My birthday's the day after tomorrow. Are you two still coming? Someone laughed. There are still 2 days left. Based on past experience, I bet she'll come and apologize tonight, Ethan lazily said. I'm fine with it. As for her, you figure it out. Well, it's still in your hands. Give me Augustina's number. Martin pulled out his phone. You're always scaring her when you mention breaking up. I'll bluff her. Say that if she doesn't show up, I'll get my brother to break up with you. The phone dialed, and Ethan reminded him. Don't scare her too much. She's got a small heart. Martin said hello, and after a long pause, a strange voice answered. He froze in place, unsure, and asked Ethan, is this the right number? Why is a guy answering the phone in the middle of the night? Ethan's gaze shifted, narrowing slightly through the haze of smoke. Chapter 7. When I woke up, my hand was tightly grasped by someone. I tried to move, but it was gripped even tighter. I turned my head, and only then did Ethan loosen his grip, folding his fingers and stretching his wrist. He looked at my condition and, with a dark expression, asked, You took so many sleeping pills. Are you trying to kill yourself? Who taught you this? Now you're threatening people with suicide? It hit me then. I had answered my mom's call and couldn't sleep, so I thought a bit of medicine might help me rest. But I had taken too many pills by mistake. By the time I realized something was wrong, I pressed the emergency button in the villa, and the butler must have arrived in time. Ethan's face was full of exhaustion and anger, with a hint of fear. I couldn't help but smile. How could he think that I would use suicide as a way to threaten him? I didn't explain. Instead, I asked, Can't you just be enough for me? As the words left my mouth, I realized my voice had cracked. Is it really so hard to love me the way I love you? I asked again, desperately, thinking that maybe I could give him one last chance. I was so shameless that if he agreed, I'd let everything slide and pretend nothing had happened. I felt sorry for myself, even disgusted with myself. But what could I do? Some people are just unavoidable, destined to be a calamity. One last time, okay? I whispered, tears falling onto my hand. Don't go looking for them anymore. Ethan stared at me in silence for a long time before speaking. Later, I would often think back to that moment. I wondered if, as he looked at me with tear-streaked cheeks, his eyes dark, if for just a moment, there had been any wavering in his heart. But in the end, he just sighed and began reasoning with me. Augustina, did I promise you anything? He frowned, as if recalling, looking at me like I was a child asking for candy. I froze for a moment, my palm tightening into a fist. He shook his head. Love? Marriage? Loyalty? I never promised you anything. We're at this point because we both wanted it. I still stand by what I said. If you can't take it, we part on good terms. He stood up, shoved the bottle of sleeping pills into his coat pocket, and said, "Rest well." He tucked the blanket around me. "Martin's birthday is the day after tomorrow. I've already prepared a gift for you. When you're ready, give me a call, and I'll come pick you up." I should have known. Ethan is a selfish person. Completely selfish. As long as I have no bottom line. Every time I take a step back, he takes 100 steps forward. It was like this before, and it's the same now. Maybe I really did take too many sleeping pills, which is why I said those things. A person without a heart can't be warmed. I picked up my phone and opened the email interface. I stared at it blankly for a few seconds before sending the confirmation message. Chapter 8. On Martin's birthday. I didn't show up. Ethan didn't contact me either. Instead, Martin called me late at night. "Augustina, you're too heartless. You can argue, but how can you not come to my birthday party?" He must have had a lot to drink. Sounding tipsy. "You can quarrel all you want, but you're acting all high and mighty. Are you really going to break up with me?" I said. "You bookworm. Do you really care? Don't come crying to me asking for help contacting him later. You know what kind of guy he is. If he didn't like how obedient and sensible you are. Think about it, out of all those women, why are you the one who stayed for 5 years?" I was still working late. I forced a smile, muttered happy birthday, and hung up. The next day, I sat in a cafe while the man across from me rambled on and on. I gave him a quick once-over. He wasn't bad-looking, clean, handsome, and fair-skinned. "I heard you're making about 10 to 20,000 a month now, but private companies like yours are still less stable than those of us in the public sector." I took a sip of coffee. Though to be precise, it was 22,154 after taxes, excluding the quarterly bonus. But Ethan always said my job was pathetic, that I earned barely enough to buy him a meal. I didn't respond, and the man across from me continued, "Your job must require a lot of overtime, right? Once you're married, someone has to take care of things at home. Have you considered changing to a different job?" I put down my cup and said, "The child will take my last name. You don't mind, right? I'm an only child, and our family can't lose the family line." He was stunned. "Your mom never mentioned this, and I'm an only child too. If not, you can have 2 children. I suddenly felt it was absurd. If Ethan saw the scene, he would definitely ridicule me. Finding some cheap alternative after leaving him, I rushed back to work. The matchmaker man tried to keep me there. "I really like you. We can talk more about the children later." I looked at him again and realized his expression had become grotesque, almost frightening. I'd ruined the blind date. The next second, my mom's call came chasing after me. "What are you thinking? Why are you talking about children at a time like this? When have I ever asked for your children to take our family name?" I didn't have time to soothe her, so I said a few random words and hung up. I didn't even have time to deal with my messy emotions before rushing off for a business trip. Chapter 9. When I returned from the business trip, I stood at the door with my suitcase but found that the password wasn't working. I thought I had remembered it wrong, but when it told me to try again or it would lock, I gave up. It was Ethan who changed the password. If nothing had changed, I probably would have already been blocked by him. Sure enough, my messages were rejected, and I couldn't reach him. He had blocked me before, during our worst argument. I wouldn't back down, so he deleted all my contact info. Later, when I regretted it, I tried everything to contact him, even getting several new phone cards. In the end, it was Martin who couldn't stand it and took me to see him. Ethan probably thought I would act like I used to. Crawling back to him, I stepped back with my suitcase and looked at the house in front of me. In all the years I had been with Ethan, I had never acted high and mighty. Everything he gave me, I accepted. The clothes, shoes, and bags that I couldn't use, I'd exchange them for cash every year. Ethan knew, but he didn't care about that small amount of money. To make it easier for me to work, he bought me 2 properties. At first, he even stayed with me for a while. I made sure every corner of the house was arranged so he would be comfortable, but he couldn't get used to that kind of apartment. So I moved with him into this villa. Here, we spent most of our time together, which I could still look back on. The year I broke my foot. He personally took care of me for 6 months. A man who had never done anything domestic learned how to make soup. He did my physical therapy on time every day, and his techniques were better than the doctor's. He was afraid I'd get bored, so he carried me up and down the stairs, took me to the garden to soak in the sun, and to the backyard to watch the swans. I grasped the suitcase handle and turned to walk out. Just then, the phone rang again. It was Martin. "You can't get in, can you?" He sounded more sober than last time. "He found out about your blind date, didn't he? I didn't expect this from you. First, it was suicide. Now it's finding a man." He laughed. "I thought you were naive." He changed his tone. "But sister, I'm not the one causing trouble. There are so many good men out there. Why stick to one tree? You saw the pictures, right? He had that college girl sitting next to him just to make you yield. I'm really not trying to stir things up. He can have someone sit next to him today, and tomorrow, he'll have someone sitting on him. Martin has always been like this since I met him. Sometimes, he'd side with Ethan and throw sarcastic comments at me. Other times, he'd make insinuations about Ethan in front of me. But this time, he was right. So, I politely replied to him, "You're right." Before he could reply, I hung up. Chapter 10. Back at the company, I didn't lift my head once the entire morning. I had a major project on hand, and we were nearing the final stages of signing the contract. I couldn't afford to stop for even a moment. Before meeting with the partners, I drank 2 cans of iced coffee to make my sleep-deprived mind more alert. The partners' company was located in the city center, and by the time we arrived, there were already people waiting for us. From presenting the proposal to the discussion, everything went smoothly. The one who was going to seal the deal was a young man named Walter, their boss. I took a glance at him, and his aura seemed oddly familiar. It wasn't until I saw Ethan walking that it clicked, the way Walter carried himself. That air of being a spoiled rich kid belonged to their circle. Walter ran his company casually, and when meeting with partners, outsiders like Ethan could come and go as they pleased. They exchanged greetings, and throughout the meeting, Ethan didn't glance at me once. Walter invited him to review the project proposal, and Ethan sat down as if it were an important task. Flipping through the pages, one by one, I kept my composure, but my palms were sweating. I knew these people too well, whether it was for face saving or because of personal connections. If Ethan said no today, this project wouldn't happen. This was the last project before I planned to leave, and it was going to be the brightest part of my resume. I couldn't accept failure. I kept my eyes fixed on Ethan's hand, my mind racing with one plan after another. Just when I felt like I was about to snap, Ethan slapped the papers shut with a snap. He gave a succinct evaluation. "Not bad. Walter will profit." Walter laughed loudly and said he would take Ethan out for a drink. I exhaled in relief. In that brief moment, Ethan looked up at me. After the meeting, I walked behind him, and he followed me out, walking alongside me. "Did you think I was heartless and immoral, coming over here for revenge?" Ethan said, smiling as he nodded at Walter's subordinates. He glanced at me. "Though I think your job is beneath me. Ruining someone's livelihood is like burning their ancestors' tombs. Poor people don't make money easily. I still have some public morals." I stopped and turned to face him. "Do you think I should be grateful to you now? Without him, I wouldn't even have to go through all this. Why does he act so high and mighty? Like he's doing me a favor?" "I didn't mean that." He clicked his tongue. "By the way, where did you put your luggage when you came back from your trip?" "Oh, right. There was a robbery at home, and I forgot to tell you the new password." "You didn't even ask me. You're so busy making this little money." Ethan rarely lowered himself like this, trying to ease the situation. In the past, I would have acted clueless, and things would have gone back to normal, but I was tired now, and I couldn't play those heartfelt roles anymore. He could tell, so he kept talking. "The people you don't like, I've deleted them." Before he could finish, his phone rang, and he quickly silenced it. I smiled mockingly, said nothing, and turned to walk out. He grabbed my arm. "Enough, Augustina. Don't overdo it. I've been trying to smooth things over. What more do you want?" I looked at him calmly. "I'm not dissatisfied. I just need to remind you again. I've already broken up with you unilaterally. Don't pretend you don't know. By the time I finished, there was no point in continuing the conversation. His phone rang again at the right moment. He answered it in front of me, and a sweet, unfamiliar female voice came through. Maybe it was the college girl Martin had mentioned, or maybe it was someone else. Who cared? Ethan stared into my eyes and said, word for word, to the person on the other end, wait for me. I'll be there soon. Chapter 11. Brandon looked at Augustina's resignation letter, feeling unsure about what to do. After thinking it over, he decided to make the call and discuss it. Ethan listened to him on the other end and after a long pause, scoffed. She loves that job so much. How could she possibly want to quit? Brandon scratched his head and hesitantly asked, so, about the process, should I approve it or not? Not sure what he'd hit a nerve with. Ethan started cursing. Approve it. Why wouldn't you? If she wants to quit, let her quit. It's a blessing to get rid of this crappy job. What kind of crappy company is yours? Since she started working for you, it's been nothing but disappearing every other day. And she dresses like a beggar. Do you even know how to run a company? Brandon hung up the phone, thinking to himself that Augustina was one of the more decent employees in his company. She wore light makeup every day and would even wear little heels. He should see the others at his company, wearing leggings under skirts and tucking thermal pants into their socks. He still couldn't understand these rich people. Their wives, married to big bosses, spent their days working like donkeys in a small company, as if they were getting some life experience. He threw the phone down and muttered, old fool. Then he looked over at Augustina's desk and, in a somewhat fair and just tone, said, you're an old fool too. Without further ado, he approved Augustina's resignation, although he felt a bit sorry, because her ability was top-notch. But when Ethan spoke, he had no choice but to follow orders. It wasn't until half a month later that Ethan found out Augustina had left Beijing. He paused while signing, not lifting his head. If she wants to leave, then let her. What? Do you think I can't live without her? Martin responded with an O as if indifferent. That's not it. She's just a bit fair-skinned, with big round eyes, a mole at the corner of her eye, a slim waist, long legs, but dull and honest. Ethan raised his chin. A woman like that is a dime a dozen outside. Do you really think I can't find someone else? Martin crossed his arms, staring at him thoughtfully. He rubbed his chin. A dime a dozen? Are they really that easy to find? Chapter 12. It had been a month since I got home. At first, my mom was warm and welcoming, but now she was starting to get impatient. I had suddenly quit my job and returned home, and she didn't ask any questions. Instead, she kept saying she couldn't sleep at night, and kept pressuring me to go on blind dates. One night, I tiptoed into her room in the dark and shook her awake, asking, isn't this a nice sleep? She slapped my shoulder. You brat. I couldn't argue with her. So after much persuasion, I finally agreed to meet the blind date she had arranged. To my surprise, the man was broad-shouldered, narrow-waisted, with flawless features, high nose, thin lips. Though not as striking as Ethan, he had a good temperament and was pleasant to look at. I was shocked. Such a catch existed here? Had my mom set me up in a scam? After a meal, our conversation flowed effortlessly, as if we were soulmates. I was certain this was an elaborate scam targeting me. After all, for someone to make me genuinely happy with every word, it was either a well-rehearsed act or extremely high emotional intelligence. After a long pause, I suddenly remembered something. By the way, what's your name again? He looked at me and chuckled helplessly. Augustina. You really don't remember me? I studied him carefully but still couldn't place him. Sorry. You, Skylar. He introduced himself. In high school, I went abroad with my parents. I just came back recently for a research project. I'm single. No bad habits. I gasped. You've changed so much. And you still remember me? He was once a top student, handsome, always wearing glasses, a typical nerd. Now, he seemed like an icy, disciplined figure. I stuck to the blind date principles and asked again. So, my mom didn't tell you, but the kids have to take my last name. You won't mind, right? He blinked and smiled. I don't mind at all. I've always believed the final decision on having children should belong to the woman. I looked up at him. There was no trace of joking in his face. It was a thoughtful response. Honestly, rationally speaking, I knew that if I were considering marriage, Skylar would be a good choice. But emotionally, I still hadn't cleared up the mess inside me, and I couldn't bring myself to lead him on. Skylar dropped me off downstairs, and I watched his car drive away. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence behind me. If I come late tomorrow, do I still get to join your little dinner party? Chapter 13. I turned around to face Ethan's stark, brooding gaze. I scanned the surroundings and confirmed that this wasn't a dream. What are you doing here? A wave of inexplicable irritation surged inside me. He tilted his chin. Your stuff is taking up space at my place. Go back and collect it. Since the day I couldn't get into the password-locked door, I hadn't been inside again. There were indeed a lot of my things in there. Without looking back, I said, just throw it away. I don't want it anymore. You can't just say you don't want it. He stepped forward quickly and grabbed my arm, gritting his teeth. It felt like he wasn't just talking about the stuff, but something else. I stared into his eyes. I'm tired of it. I'm bored. I don't like it anymore. So I'm throwing it all away. That's my freedom. I had imagined that, even if he knew I had quit and left, he'd probably just sneer and say let her do whatever. He was always above everyone else, born with pride, even during those years of reckless behavior. To him, it was just an exercise of power. Under power, everyone was an ant, and everyone had to obey. But now, he was staring at me with eyes full of frustration, questioning me. I rarely saw him lose composure. Ethan, do you want me to come back to Beijing with you? I asked directly. He bit his lip, not saying anything. See, someone like him, even if he regretted it or wanted to keep me, would still hold himself high. He wouldn't even deign to ask. Come back with me. I shook my head. Even if I did go back, it wouldn't have anything to do with you. I won't gamble my marriage on you changing for the better. Breaking up is one thing, but divorce is complicated. He replied. What if I can make it work? I raised an eyebrow, saying nothing more. Everything was understood without words. Chapter 14. After that day, Ethan didn't leave. He casually bought a move-in ready apartment near my place, and whenever he had free time, he would come by the noodle shop. Sometimes, he would run into Skylar. Skylar wasn't as confident as Ethan. After a few encounters, he gradually stopped coming. The day Skylar left for the U.S., I treated him to a meal. He drank a lot, staring at me the whole time. If I had come earlier or later, it would have been fine, but it had to be this moment. Yes, it had to be this moment. I hadn't let go completely, stepping forward only when I found myself in a desperate situation. Only self-help could save me. I raised my glass. May fate bring us together again. Ethan, always eloquent, noticed that I hadn't reacted much these days, so he shifted his attention to working on my mom, a man born with privilege. Even he learned how to serve people dishes, calculate the bill, and do the accounting. The customers at the small shop were tough. Several times, I saw him frown, wanting to lose his temper but holding it back. A towering man squeezed into the tiny noodle shop, and no matter how much he tried to hurry, they just wouldn't leave. Under this pressure, my mom started to waver more and more. One day, out of the blue, she suggested that maybe I should reconcile with Ethan. I paused for a moment, and calmly said, Mom, he cheated on me. You know this. So what? Didn't he apologize? Look at how he's been these days. He's a young master from a wealthy family, doing menial tasks, begging you for forgiveness. Cheating doesn't matter. He admitted his mistake. He knows he's wrong, and he won't do it again, right? And besides, what man doesn't cheat? The ones who don't cheat before marriage will still cheat after. Your dad, such a decent man, didn't he cheat too? Any man you marry will cheat. If you marry someone rich and powerful, at least you'll have lots of money if he cheats, which is better than marrying an ordinary man. I asked her calmly. And then? Get married. Just like you begged Dad when you were younger? Don't you know? I learned from you. I learned how to beg a man in a pathetic way. That's why for these years, I kept begging him, kept forgiving him, but he kept cheating. Mom, is this what you want? I marry an unfaithful man and have a child no one wants, and spend my life being judged by others? Dad cheated when I was 6. Back then, I was too young to understand, but I witnessed Mom forgive him over and over. If he hadn't been hit by a car on his way to see his mistress, she might still be forgiving him to this day. These words, I would never say in front of her, but now, I aimed them at her without hesitation. When I realized what I had said, I wiped my tears. Sorry, Mom. She squeezed the apron in her hand and gave me a quick glance before turning and walking into the bedroom. Later that night, my bedroom door opened, and a pair of calloused hands gently touched my face. I heard her softly choke on her words. I'm sorry, Augustina. I shouldn't have said that during the day. I didn't respond. In the darkness, my tears soaked into the pillow. Mother-daughter relationships in this world are like vines and trees, interdependent, intertwined, and coexisting, filled with extreme love and expectations, but also tinged with subtle resentment and disgust. Often, it feels like an unsolvable knot, silently consuming each other. But more often, after saying something thoughtless, there's regret, wishing for a moment of pain to never have been caused. Chapter 15. The next day, I heard that my mom had used a broom to kick Ethan out and told him not to come to the noodle shop anymore. I didn't pay much attention to it. Instead, I kept my head down, looking at the admission letter on my computer screen. In fact, from the day I decided to leave Beijing, I had already made 2 plans. My mom didn't lack money, and with my savings over the years, I could live comfortably without working. Technically, I could lie around for the rest of my life and still never run out of money. The reason I hadn't quit working these past years was less about necessity and more about keeping myself grounded. When I had just graduated from college, Ethan had once suggested I simply stop working altogether. How much can you make a day? Just tell me if you want something. Why do you need to work for someone else? Your pocket money already equals a few months of your salary. Although he said it like a suggestion, his tone was far from gentle back then. After all, what he wanted was a partner who could drop everything and revolve around him. If I couldn't do that, there were plenty of other options for him. But back then, I didn't know why. I just firmly believed that I needed my own job. So, I leaned in and kissed him, speaking softly, please, just let me work. He couldn't resist and let me kiss him a few more times before reluctantly agreeing. That first month, my salary was just over 9,000. After struggling for half a year, I bought him a cufflink. When he picked it up and looked at it, I nervously hid one hand behind my back and pointed at the box on tiptoe. It's my own money. I didn't spend any of yours. He probably never used such a cheap cufflink and couldn't bring himself to compliment it. He just smiled casually and said, "Oh, such a good girl. You even know to buy me a gift." I shook my head and typed a few words on social media. Is it too late for a 26-year-old girl to study abroad? The page popped up with numerous consultancy agencies and promotions. I clicked on a post, and the first comment I saw read, I'm in the US now. If I told you my classmate is 75 this year, would that surprise you? There's no time like now. You'll never be younger than today. I smiled quietly. I knew deep down, I had made my decision long ago. All these inquiries were just another form of seeking validation. A few days later, my mom said Ethan had to return to Beijing for some urgent matter. I told her about my plans to study abroad, and she immediately opposed it. Have you gone crazy from reading too much? You're already 26, and you still want to study? The most important thing for you now is to get married. You're at the perfect age to get married. And here you are talking about studying. You must have read too many books. And now you've lost your mind. I knew she wouldn't accept it easily. But since the day she sent me to Beijing for school, she should have realized that my world would be vast. This society is too harsh when it comes to age. It's so harsh that once you graduate, you're expected to have a perfect job. Once you have a job, you need the perfect partner. And once you're married, you're expected to have a son and a daughter. Everyone is conditioned to follow a strict timeline in life. My mom was at the top of this list. She had said in a stern voice, if you go abroad, Don't ever come back. I'll pretend I don't have a daughter. She had controlled me since I was little, and now that I was no longer under her control, she was a bit panicked. I didn't change my mind for the rest of the time. My mom and I didn't speak to each other. On the day I left for abroad, I didn't plan to say goodbye. I just wanted to quietly drag my suitcase out of the house. But when I looked down, I saw that my tote bag was stuffed full, and there was a stack of money tied tightly with rubber bands. The bank where I could exchange currency was over 10 kilometers away. I held the money, looked at the closed bedroom door, and my eyes began to burn. At 26, the plane disappeared into the clouds. At 30,000 feet, my life was taking off again. Chapter 16. I settled into a foreign country, trying to adjust to the time difference and the accents. There were no old entanglements, and even the air felt unfamiliar. Not long after I had settled, Ethan got wind of the news and appeared at the bottom of my apartment building, haunting me like a ghost. He was far too familiar, his attitude so casual that it felt as though there was no barrier between us. If you had told me you wanted to study abroad, I would have sent you right after graduation. Why go around in circles? He looked around my small apartment with some dissatisfaction. I have a place near your school. You can move in, and I'll have 2 aunts there to take care of you. I kept my head down, packing my things, and didn't respond. Someone like Ethan, the more you push him away, the more he'll take advantage of it. Many times, when I would cry and yell at him, trying to pick a fight, he would just find it amusing. On the rare occasions he was in a good mood, he'd try to comfort me, but most of the time, I was the one lowering my head. I didn't make an effort to push him away anymore. I just quietly watched him move around me. He acted as though he was still my partner, chasing away any man who showed interest in me. He looked down on everyone else, dismissing them with a sneer. Not even the same breed of monkey. How could you even look at them? My studies were overwhelming, and he, having nothing else to do, sent people to help me, which made my life a little easier. The food in this country was unexpectedly awful, and although I didn't live in his place, I didn't mind his 2 aunts so much over time. They had come from China and were skilled in various cuisines. Every day, between classes, I'd look forward to their cooking to get through the day. Over the course of a year, Ethan traveled back and forth between China and here. Sometimes he'd stay for a few days, and at night, he'd fly back for early morning meetings. I heard from Martin that when Ethan returned to China, someone asked him what he was doing traveling so often. He responded with a bit of pride. My girlfriend's studying abroad, and I'm here accompanying her. Martin called me from overseas, his voice full of frustration. I swear, I really can't believe you. How did you get back together with him? You're such a damn love-struck fool. He hesitated before continuing. You're studying abroad, keeping your eyes on your books. Do you even know what he's doing back in China? I folded the page of my book and asked calmly. Is he seeing other women? Martin was silent for a moment before hanging up the phone without saying anything else. Of course, I knew exactly what I was doing. Chapter 17. I made myself available to Ethan again, much like before. Over the course of this year, his initial attitude of apologizing gradually gave way to his true nature. In his eyes, this time, no matter how big the fight, it was just another ordinary quarrel. I was still that obedient girl he could manipulate, always making up after an argument. Ethan and I remained entangled for a long time, long enough for me to almost graduate. The day before Ethan was to return to China, he seemed distracted, his fingers tapping the table, lost in thought. It seemed like he was making a difficult decision. I glanced at him, then returned my attention to my book. He smirked. When I get back, I'll give you a surprise. Of course, I knew exactly what he planned, because I had my own surprise for him. A week later, when Ethan flew in overnight from China and arrived at my place, the door behind me was wide open, and there, in plain sight, was a man with his upper body bare. He had an amazing physique, a stunning mixed-race face, and was my first choice after much deliberation. Anyone who wasn't a fool could tell what had happened in that room the night before. Ethan crushed his cigarette, staring at me and Xiache, and suddenly let out a laugh. Before he could get angry, I patted Xiache's face, urging him to leave. Xiache glanced at Ethan, raised an eyebrow, and started to play it weak. You look pretty fierce. No wonder you can't get rid of him. I know some of the Chinese gangsters around here. I covered Xiache's mouth and pushed him out the door. Ethan was not someone you wanted to mess with. After Xiache left, Ethan didn't walk toward me. I thought he would explode in anger. But instead, he turned his back to me, one hand propped against the car door, staying silent for a long, long time. After what seemed like an eternity, he turned around, and I saw his eyes were red. He took a few steps forward, bent down in front of me, almost looking into my eyes. Augustina, he said my name, his voice tight with anger. Do you know what I did this past week? I went back to the old house, faced off with Grandma and my mom, and told them I was going to get married. I went to pick out your wedding dress. I had people design a ring overnight, changed the design over and over because I wasn't happy with it. When I told everyone I was going to marry you, Augustina, what were you doing? You were kissing and sleeping with other men. He looked like a fool as people asked him. Wasn't he the guy who swore he never wanted to get married? Why had he suddenly changed? He nonchalantly replied that he wasn't against marriage. He just hadn't met the right person. When Ethan said that, everyone in the room laughed. He had always believed that he wasn't at the point where he couldn't live without her. But people, like things, become more possessive the longer they've been kept. He couldn't stand the sight of her smiling at other men. Martin was the only one who stopped him, but not for his sake. He said, "Stop hurting the girl." Ethan disagreed. What are you talking about? Augustina and I are meant for each other. If we really could leave each other, she wouldn't still be by my side. He thought Augustina was just lacking security. He'd marry her, and that would solve it. These 2 years, she hadn't rejected him or pushed him away. He was foolish enough to think that meant they were back together. But the truth was, she had been waiting for him all along. Chapter 18. I pushed Ethan's hand away, and I felt so calm, so incredibly calm. Seeing his pain and tears, I realized I no longer felt any sadness. I thought, in this moment, perhaps I had finally been saved from all the past. I don't remember, I said slowly. What did I promise you? Love? Marriage? Loyalty? I never promised you anything. Ethan, after we broke up 2 years ago, we no longer had any ties, right? Pain flashed in his eyes, and he gripped me tightly, unable to utter a single word in rebuttal. Does it hurt? It should hurt. Even this much pain is nothing compared to what I felt back then. I had met Avery in the US. She took the money, studied abroad right after graduating, and is now an executive at a foreign company. That day, we had coffee, and she remembered the past, saying, actually, when Ethan looked at us, it was like he was looking at an object. But when he looked at you, it was different. You must have felt, at some moments, that in his heart, you were different. Before she left, she patted me on the shoulder. But I'm glad you overcame those moments. I had always said, Ethan was my calamity. As messed up as he was, he still had a fatal attraction for me. All along this journey, I was constantly overcoming those moments. Ethan, like a desperate adventurer, had tried everything. Forget what happened last night. Consider it a one-night stand. Forget that man. I can pretend nothing happened. One-night stand? I laughed at him. You know me best. I'm the famous good girl. How could I do something like a one-night stand? I really liked him. I liked his face. I liked his youthful, strong body. How could that not be considered liking? He snapped. You can pretend it was. I raised my head in disdain and said, do you think I'm you? Ethan was too weak to hold onto my shoulder, but he still wouldn't let go. I knew. Those days of ours, his wild and unruly nights, they were like the dullest knife, slicing deeper and deeper into his most painful places. I gently took a step back, creating the last bit of distance between us. What you can't let go of is control. It's habit, not me. The wind brushed through my hair, and my voice was soft, yet every word was certain. Don't come looking for me again, Ethan. Chapter 19. After graduation, I got into investment, with a sharp eye for opportunities, and each deal turned into profit. Although Ethan wasn't a good person, his insights and intellect were top-notch. In those years, whenever he had free time, he would teach me many things, guiding me step by step. When my career was thriving, my mom stopped pressuring me about blind dates. When neighbors asked, she would snap back at them. Stop pushing me. My daughter can choose to never marry, and it's none of your business. I didn't plan on never getting married. Though, later, I saw the wedding dress that Ethan had chosen for me. He really knew me well. The dress was beautiful, but I still didn't agree to marry him. He didn't believe me. I can wait. One day, you'll want to wear it. Still that same certainty and confidence. I smiled, although he appeared confident on the outside. When he was drunk in the middle of the night, he would go find Martin. He was truly isolated, with no one to turn to. So he turned to Martin for help. Help me talk to her. She's so obedient. Why is she being so stubborn this time? Martin clicked his tongue. If Augustina truly listened to him, it would have been a different story, right? Later, many others subtly tried to convince me as well. Ethan may only have a fraction of sincerity, but at least he's given it all to you. I didn't quite agree. Was I not worthy of a man who would give me all his heart? When women have the means, they can be choosy, including when it comes to men. At the age of 33, I got married to a man I had carefully chosen. The wedding was held at my parents' place, and my mom couldn't stop smiling. The grand banquet, with declarations of love louder than any other voice. I didn't believe in men, nor in their vows. Would the man beside me truly be loyal to me for life? I don't know, but I do know. A good girl's dictionary doesn't only include endurance. If that day ever comes, I'll kick him out. The man beside me suddenly seemed to sense something and glanced at me, with his big eyes. He looked a bit hurt. Wife, it's a great day. Why are you thinking about all this nonsense? I smiled and squeezed his hand. On the day of the wedding, Martin came, bringing a gift. He scratched his nose, unsure what to give, feeling like giving something at someone else's wedding would just add to the awkwardness. He invited Ethan to join, but Ethan refused, saying he couldn't stand Augustina wearing someone else's chosen wedding dress. I looked down at the ring. It was the diamond ring, worth quite a lot. In the noisy wedding hall, I vaguely heard the sound of a car leaving. I turned to look, the red drapes swaying, welcoming and sending guests off. And with it, I sent away the sunset of my 19-year-old self. Those intense years and entanglements faded like a soft breeze, leaving no trace. From now on, love and hate are in the past, and the road ahead is clear.